The chipped formica of the diner booth felt cool under Leo Maxwell's forearm. He swirled the lukewarm coffee, the diner's morning buzz a familiar comfort. 7:13 a.m. He had exactly 8 minutes before his shift at the 911 dispatch center began. 8 minutes he was currently fracturing between two lives. Everything okay? Han, Mabel, the diner. Owner and resident Oracle slid a plate of untouched pancakes in front of him. You look like you haven't slept a wink. Just thinking, Mabel, Leo murmured, forcing a smile. He hadn't slept. Not properly, not for weeks. The guilt was a persistent ache, a hollow space in his chest that even strong coffee couldn't fill. He spent the last 4 hours with Clara and 6-year-old Finn, building a Lego fortress in their tiny sun-drenched apartment. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Dispatch, he glanced at the caller ID. Gotta run, Mabel. Thanks. He tossed a 10 onto the table and slipped out, snagging a napkin to blot the faint smear of strawberry jam Finn had left on his cheek. He hadn't even noticed it until now. The dispatcher's station was a hive of controlled chaos. Fluorescent lights hummed over banks of monitors displaying maps, sensor readings, and scrolling text. Leo slipped into his headset, the cool plastic a temporary shield. Maxwell, ready to roll. Good morning. Leo, came the clipped voice of Captain Harding. Busy day expected, 4th of July. You know how it is. Fireworks complaints, lost kids, the usual. Leo nodded. Although Harding couldn't see him the usual. That was a lie he told himself every year. It was Sifton never, just the usual. The morning unfolded in a predictable rhythm of minor emergencies. A fender bender on the I-95. A false alarm triggered by a faulty smoke detector. A neighbor dispute escalating over a barbecue grill. Each call chipped away at the remaining fragments of his sleep, adding to the dull throb behind his eyes. He took a call from old Mrs. Henderson reporting fireworks already going off to V. It was 9:47 a.m. They re-disturbing my budgies, dear, she chirped. Leo calmly explained the city's ordinance, mentally adding it to the growing list of violations he'd have to flag for patrol units. Outside, the city was awash in red, white, and blue. Flags snapped in the breeze, music blared from open windows, and the smell of charcoal hung heavy in the air. Everywhere he looked, people were setting up for the day, blissfully unaware of the knot of unease tightening in his gut. A forced normalcy draped over everything, a fragile veneer attempting to conceal the ugliness he sometimes glimpsed beneath the surface. Then the first odd report came in. A woman calling from Elmwood Park complaining of dizziness and nausea. Just everything spinning, she gasped, her voice weak. And I feel really sick, Leo categorized it as potential heat stroke. It was a scorcher. Stay hydrated, ma'am. We've dispatched an ambulance to your location. He filed the incident report, adding it to a growing list of similar complaints. 2 more followed in quick succession. A teenager at the waterfront exhibiting the same symptoms. An elderly man collapsed on a busy street corner, disoriented and confused. What is going on, dispatch partner? Maria asked, glancing at her screen. Heat stroke is spiking, but these are all over the place. No common link, except heat, I guess. Probably just anxiety, Leo said, trying to sound reassuring. Even to himself. 4th of July jitters. Fireworks can freak people out. The calls kept coming, each one mirroring the last dizziness. Nausea, disorientation. Reports trickled in from different parts of the city, not clustered in one location. No apparent demographic connection. Captain Harding's voice crackled over the intercom. Dispatch, what is with the spike in medical calls? Are we seeing a heat wave event? Still assessing, Captain, Leo replied, his fingers flying across the keyboard, pulling up weather reports, air quality data, anything that might offer an explanation. Nothing. He dismissed another call, a woman in a grocery store, slurring her speech and unable to stand. He felt a growing sense of dread, a prickling on the back of his neck. This was more than just heat stroke. This was different. His personal phone buzzed again. Clara. He hesitated. Then declined the call. He had to focus. He couldn't afford to be distracted. Not now. Leo, Harding said, his voice sharp. We have a situation, multiple people collapsing at Veteran S Park. It is the 4th of July picnic. Initial reports are Disturbing. Same symptoms, at least 20 down. And the numbers are climbing. Leo S. blood ran cold, Veteran S. Park. That is where Sarah and their daughter Emily were supposed to be. His wife, his legitimate life. The life he was so desperately trying to protect. Before he could speak, his home phone rang. He recognized the number immediately. Sarah, he snatched it up, his hand shaking. Leo, her voice was strained, laced with panic. Something's happening here, people are falling, Emily feels dizzy, we need help. He tried to speak, to offer reassurance. But the words caught in his throat. The dispatcher in him was screaming for information. For details, the husband was consumed with terror. Sarah, stay calm, he managed. His voice barely a whisper. Tell me what is happening. What symptoms does Emily have? She is pale. Leo, really pale. And she keeps saying she feels weird, like she is floating. Oh God, Leo, there is a woman over there, she is convulsing. Then, a broken transmission crackled through his headset, overriding his personal call. It was a patrol officer from Veteran S. Park. His voice ragged with urgency. Dispatch, we have a mass casualty event. People are collapsing everywhere. They're re-exhibiting neurological symptoms. Confusion, disorientation, seizures. It is like something S taken over them. The officer, S voice broke off. Replaced by a chilling static. Leo stabbed the button to reconnect, but there was only silence. He stared frozen. At the map on his monitor, a growing cluster of red icons marking the locations of the fallen in Veteran S. Park. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this was no heat wave, this was something far, far worse. And it had just begun. The flashing red and blue lights painted the idyllic scene in a lurid, unsettling glow. Veterans Park, moments ago a vibrant tapestry of picnic blankets and laughter, had become ground zero for a nightmare. Leo Maxwell, now officially Captain Maxwell. His dispatch uniform replaced with a hastily donned tactical vest, choked on the metallic tang of fear and antiseptic, as he stepped out of the command vehicle. The air throbbed with chaos. Screams mingled with the wail of sirens. Paramedics, faces grim, worked frantically, intubating patients, administering oxygen, attempting to stem the tide of collapsing bodies. Hundreds of people milled around in stunned disbelief, their festive attire sooty stars and stripes, patriotic blue suit now stained with sweat and fear. Report, Leo barked, his voice cutting through the din. Sergeant Miller, his second-in-command, rushed over, his face pale. Captain, it is bad. We're talking over 80 confirmed cases right now. Symptoms are escalating. Started with dizziness and nausea. Now we're seeing full-blown convulsions, respiratory distress, hallucinations. Some are completely catatonic. Leo surveyed the scene, his senses reeling. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. Families were huddled together, desperately trying to comfort loved ones. Children cried for their parents. The scent of hot dogs and sunscreen, still faintly discernible, felt grotesquely out of place. He moved towards a triage area where medics were frantically assessing patients. A young girl, no older than 7, thrashed on a stretcher, her eyes wide with terror. Monsters. They're coming to get me, she screamed, clawing at the restraints. Sedation now, a paramedic shouted, injecting the girl with a powerful tranquilizer. Leo knelt beside an older man, his breathing shallow and ragged. Sir, can you tell me what happened? What did you eat or drink? The man's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. The lemonade, he rasped, then coughed violently. It tasted funny, a little metallic. Metallic, Leo, metallic. Leo made a mental note. He moved to the next patient, a teenage boy. Convulsing uncontrollably, the medics were struggling to stabilize him. He overheard a snippet of conversation. No fever, no rash, no obvious neurological damage. It is like nothing we've ever seen. One medic muttered to another. Food poisoning is ruled out. We've checked all the vendors, everything's up to code. Environmental. Initial scans are negative, no airborne toxins, no chemical spills. The air quality is normal. Leo's jaw tightened, normal. The word felt like a cruel joke. He requested a full hazmat team sweep of the park, but he knew, instinctively, that they wouldn't find anything. This wasn't a conventional threat. He spent the next hour coordinating the response, directing ambulances, securing the perimeter, and attempting to gather information. The more he learned, the more confused he became. Everyone who'd fallen sick had been at the picnic, but there was no discernible pattern to their locations within the park. They'd eaten from different vendors, consumed different beverages, sat in different areas. He began questioning patients who were lucid enough to respond, searching for a common thread. Their accounts were fragmented, hazy, filled with contradictions. Several mentioned a strange feeling of unease before the symptoms hit, a subtle pressure in their heads. Others spoke of vivid, disturbing hallucinations, images of swirling colors and distorted faces. One woman insisted she'd seen the park's water fountain glowing. Another claimed to have heard a high-pitched humming sound just before collapsing. But these details felt unreliable, like the fever dreams of a sick mind. Leo paused, reviewing the initial incident reports. He noticed something odd. Several patients, when asked about what they'd been doing before falling ill, had volunteered details that seemed deliberately insignificant. A man talking about the specific shade of blue in a child's balloon. A woman obsessing over the pattern on a picnic blanket. These small, seemingly innocuous observations felt jarringly out of place, almost rehearsed. He approached Sergeant Miller. Any luck with identifying potential witnesses who weren't affected? A few, Captain. Mostly people who arrived late or were on the periphery of the main event. Miller handed Leo a list. We're interviewing them now, but so far, nothing concrete. Leo scanned the list, his gaze snagging on a name, Arthur Penhaligon, listed as park maintenance when he present during event, unaffected. He remembered seeing a lone figure tending the flower beds earlier. Bring Penhaligon to me. The park maintenance worker was a gaunt, wiry man with haunted eyes. He answered Leo's questions with terse, monosyllabic responses. Mr. Penhaligon, did you notice anything unusual today? Anything out of the ordinary? Penhaligon shrugged. It was a 4th of July picnic, Captain. Lots of noise, lots of people, nothing special. Did you notice anyone acting strangely, anyone displaying unusual behavior? Penhaligon hesitated, then shook his head. No, sir, Leo pressed him, but Penhaligon remained evasive. He sensed the man was holding something back. Just then, a medic called out urgently. Captain, we've lost another one. Leo rushed over to find a middle-aged man who had been stabled just minutes before. Now lying still, his skin clammy and gray. The medic was performing CPR, but it was clear it was too late, as Leo stood over the body. A subtle odor tickled his nostrils. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but distinctly chemical, something sweet, metallic, and disturbingly unfamiliar. He crouched down, inhaling deeply, trying to pinpoint the source. It seemed strongest near the base of a large oak tree, a short distance from where the man had collapsed. He waved over a hazmat crew member. Do a localized air scan right here. I want a complete analysis. And look for anything unusual on the ground. The crew member, initially skeptical, complied. After a few minutes, he looked up, his expression troubled. Captain, the standard field tests are coming up negative. But there is something here, something faint. Our detectors aren't identifying it, but I definitely smell something. An odor, I can't place it. Leo stared at the oak tree, a cold dread creeping into his heart. The source wasn't in the food, it wasn't in the air. It was something else, something hidden. And he had the unsettling feeling that whatever it was connected to the dying man's last words, a whispered plea lost in the chaos. The water, it is in the water. The sterile chill of the lab felt miles away from the suffocating chaos of Veterans Park. Leo Maxwell, officially on administrative leave, stood beside Dr. Eris Thorne, a forensic chemist whose reputation for brilliance was only surpassed by his disdain for bureaucracy. Eris, a wiry man with perpetually bloodshot eyes, manipulated a mass spectrometer, the machine whirring and clicking like a restless insect. So you're telling me standard toxicology screens came back clean? Eris asked, his voice gravelly. He didn't look up from the cascading data stream on the monitor. Utterly clean, Leo confirmed, his jaw tight. As if nothing's there, but there's sooty something, I smelled it. Several of the hazmat team smelled it, something off. Eris finally glanced up, a flicker of intrigued skepticism in his eyes. Off isn't a scientific term, Captain, but I trust your instincts. You always were meticulous. Their history stretched back over a decade to their days together in the police academy. Leo, a rising star already earmarked for leadership, and Eris, the brilliant but insubordinate wildcard. They've worked several cases together, Eris's unorthodox methods often yielding crucial breakthroughs, but a clash with internal affairs over evidence tampering. Eris claiming it was creative data analysis had resulted in Eris's early retirement and a permanent chip on his shoulder. I gathered samples from multiple locations at the park, Leo continued, handing Eris a sealed evidence bag containing a sample taken near the oak tree. Fountain water runoff from the splash pad, even some condensation from the picnic tables, standard protocol. But it felt wrong to let it go through official channels. A flicker of understanding crossed Eris's face. Wise move, especially given the eagerness of certain parties to downplay this whole mess. Downplay is putting it mildly, Leo said grimly. Captain Harding, under pressure from the mayor's office, was already pushing a narrative of isolated heatstroke incidents and mass hysteria. Leo had been quietly but firmly rebuffed when he'd suggested a full-scale investigation. Anything? Leo asked. Unable to hide the anxiety twisting in his gut, Eris's fingers danced across the keyboard. The spectrometer's whirring increased in intensity. Moments stretched into an eternity. Finally, Eris froze, his eyes fixed on the screen. I don't believe it, he breathed. His voice barely a whisper. He swiveled the monitor towards Leo. Look at this. The screen displayed a complex molecular structure, a web of interlocking rings and bonds. Leo, despite his limited scientific background, could sense the sheer anomaly of it. What am I looking at? A compound I've never seen before, Eris said, his brow furrowed in concentration. The spectral signature is unique. Highly unusual arrangement of carbon chains, augmented with exotic isotopes. It is unstable, extremely unstable. Unstable how? It degrades rapidly, which explains why it wasn't detected by initial screenings. But more importantly, it shouldn't exist. These isotopic combinations, they're not naturally occurring, and the molecular structure, it is too complex, too designed. This wasn't created by nature. He ran another scan, then another. I'm cross-referencing it with every database I have access to. Chemical weapons registries, pharmaceutical research, even experimental military projects, nothing. It is a ghost in the system. A compound that, according to everything we know, fighting couldn't be possible. The revelation sent a shiver down Leo's spine. This wasn't a natural outbreak. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. His phone buzzed. Sarah, he hesitated, then answered. Leo, where are you? Her voice was tight with worry. Just running some errands, honey. I'll be home soon. A lie, a familiar, corrosive lie. Emily's still not herself. She keeps talking about shadows, and she won't drink water. She says it tastes funny. The mention of water sent a fresh wave of dread through Leo. He remembered the dying man's whispered warning. I'll come home right away, he said, forcing a reassuring tone. He needed to talk to Clara, too. She had contacts in the local environmental groups. Maybe someone had heard murmurs about unusual activity. He was relying on his two worlds colliding, a dangerous game he usually avoided. The memory surfaced unbidden. A snapshot from his early days on the force. A chemical spill at a local factory, downplayed by the company and the authorities. A young boy sickened by the contaminated water, his cries for help ignored. Leo, a rookie cop then, had fought tooth and nail to expose the truth, only to be silenced and reprimanded. The bitterness of that experience had cemented his distrust of power, his deep-seated belief that institutions often prioritize profit and reputation over human lives. He terminated the call with Sarah, his resolve hardening. He wouldn't let history repeat itself. He discreetly began questioning park employees, bypassing his superiors. He hit a wall everywhere he turned. Witnesses clammed up, offering vague descriptions or claiming to have seen nothing unusual. The official line, if it treated heat stroke, mass hysteria food, was clearly being enforced. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, Old Man Hemlock, a retired steelworker who spent his days feeding the pigeons in Veterans Park. Hemlock had a reputation for being eccentric, but possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of the town's industrial history. Used to be a plant over by Blackwood Creek, Hemlock rasped, scattering breadcrumbs for the birds. Chemtech Solutions closed down about 6 months ago, real quiet like. Heard they were working on some top-secret stuff. Biotech, they said. But there was always whispers about something else, something more sinister. Chemtech Solutions. Leo remembered the name. It had briefly surfaced in a local news report about job losses. He dismissed it at the time now. It felt like a key piece of the puzzle. He drove to the outskirts of town, following Hemlock's directions. The Chemtech plant was a decaying monstrosity of corrugated metal and shattered windows, surrounded by a rusted chain-link fence. The air hung heavy with the scent of decay and neglect. He scaled the fence, the metal groaning under his weight, and cautiously entered the grounds. The interior was a scene of industrial wasteland. Abandoned equipment lay scattered amongst piles of debris. Shattered glass crunched under his boots. He found a locked office, the door partially ajar. He forced it open and stepped inside, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. The room was ransacked, files strewn across the floor, but one document remained wedged between two overturned filing cabinets. It was a project report dated just weeks before the plant's closure. The title was blurred, but Leo could make out a few key words: Project Nightingale, neuroactive compound, waterborne delivery system. A chill ran down his spine. He'd found his ghost. And it was anything but benign. He barely had time to photograph the document before his radio crackled to life. It was Sergeant Miller, his voice laced with urgency. "Captain, you need to get back to headquarters. Now, Internal Affairs wants to talk to you. They're asking about your unauthorized investigation, and they know about Eris Thorne." The rain came down in sheets, turning the already treacherous grounds of the Chemtech plant into a slick, muddy quagmire. Leo Maxwell, hunched low, navigated the wreckage, his raincoat offering little protection against the relentless downpour. He ignored Miller's warning, choosing to press on. He was too close to turning back now. The office he found offered a starting point, but it was clear someone had been here recently, attempting to erase any trace of the plant. As true activities, he examined the decimated files, piecing together fragments of information. Project Nightingale seemed to be the central focus citywide research initiative, centered around a novel neuroactive compound designed for something. The reports were intentionally vague, filled with scientific jargon and obfuscation. He discovered a series of encrypted emails referencing a government contract with a shadowy organization known as Phoenix Group. The emails hinted at trials, modifications, and a growing concern over unforeseen side effects. He found a shipping manifest detailing a large-scale delivery of the neuroactive compound Civic-designated NX-78. Civen to Chemtech just weeks before the plant. Closure, a notation at the bottom of the manifest caught his eye. Chemcore Industries Civen Confidential. Chemcore, the name echoed in his mind. A multinational conglomerate with a vast portfolio spanning pharmaceuticals, agriculture, and defense. They were a major employer in the region, wielding considerable political influence. Leo remembered Captain Harding mentioning a recent donation Chemcore had made to the mayor's election campaign. He continued his search, venturing deeper into the plant's bowels. The air grew thick with the acrid stench of chemicals. He discovered a hidden storage area concealed behind a false wall inside. Stacked neatly on pallets were dozens of corroded drums labeled with biohazard symbols. He cautiously opened one, and a viscous, oily liquid sloshed inside, emitting a faint, sickly, sweet odor he recognized from Veterans Park. Illegal dumping. Chemtech had simply closed down. They covered up a disaster, abandoning a toxic legacy to haunt the community. He photographed the drums, meticulously documenting the evidence. The scale of the contamination was alarming. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a deliberate act of environmental sabotage. Suddenly, a harsh light flooded the storage area. Leo whirled around, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. Two figures in dark uniforms stood silhouetted in the doorway. Security personnel Chemcorp security team. Judging by the insignia on their sleeves. Freeze. Don't move, one of them barked, leveling a pistol at him. Leo slowly raised his hands, his mind racing. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and miles from backup. He underestimated Chemcorp's reach, their willingness to protect their secrets. He braced himself for the inevitable. "Who are you?" the other guard demanded, stepping closer. "What are you doing here, police?" Leo said, his voice steady despite the knot of fear in his stomach. "Captain Maxwell. I am investigating reports of illegal dumping." The guard scoffed. "That is funny. We haven't received any reports. This is private property. You are trespassing." Before Leo could respond, a voice boomed from behind them. "Let him go. He is with me." A man in a crisp suit strode into the storage area, tall, imposing, with a steely gaze that could cut glass. Leo recognized him instantly. Richard Harding, Captain Harding's older brother and head of security for Chemcorp Industries. Richard Harding's presence explained everything. The cover-up, the roadblocks, the pressure on Captain Harding, the entire apparatus of power was aligned to protect Chemcorp. "Captain Maxwell," Harding said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I am surprised to see you poking around here. This isn't a good look for a man of your position." Leo remained silent, gauging his options. He knew he was walking a tightrope. One wrong move, and he could end up disappearing like so many others. He managed to extract himself from the situation with a strained explanation about following up on a citizen's complaint, managing to salvage the photos he'd taken. But the encounter had left him shaken. The stakes had just been raised. Back in his car, shivering with cold and adrenaline, Leo replayed the events in his head. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, revealing a disturbing picture of greed, corruption, and environmental recklessness. But the puzzle wasn't complete. A final, unsettling piece remained hidden. He dialed Clara's number, needing to talk to someone, anyone outside the web of deceit he stumbled into. To his surprise, she didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Then tried her father, Samuel Blackwood. Samuel, a retired construction worker, was a gruff but kind man, and a stable presence in Clara and Finn's lives. Samuel answered on the third ring. "Leo, is everything all right?" "Just checking in, Mr. Blackwood," Leo said, carefully choosing his words. "I was hoping to speak with Clara. Is she with you?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. A long, uncomfortable pause. "She is out," Samuel said, his voice unusually strained. "Family matter, she is unavailable." Leo frowned. Samuel was never one to be evasive. He sensed something was wrong. "Actually, Mr. Blackwood," he continued, "we were discussing Chemtech Solutions. Do you happen to know anything about the plant?" The line went dead. Leo stared at the phone, his blood running cold. He redialed the number, but it went straight to voicemail. He checked his records, a cold dread gripping him. Samuel Blackwood wasn't just a retired construction worker. He was Sudi and had been for the last 15 years Sudi, the head of security for Chemcorp Industries. Richard Harding, us right-hand man. He'd been so focused on exposing the conspiracy that he hadn't considered the personal cost. His two lives, so carefully compartmentalized, were now on a collision course. Clara, Finn, Sarah, Emily. They were all in danger, and he, Leo Maxwell, was the one who had put them there. He'd spilled the truth. And now the spill was about to engulf everything he held dear. The morning brought a deluge of disaster. A press conference, orchestrated by the mayor's office, announced Captain Leo Maxwell's suspension pending investigation for evidence tampering and professional misconduct. The evidence. The water samples he collected from Veterans Park, conveniently discovered in his car during a fabricated routine traffic stop. The narrative was airtight. A rogue officer obsessed with a conspiracy theory, attempting to sabotage a vital local employer. The local news ran with the story, painting him as a disgraced cop, a pariah. His badge, his career, his reputation, Finney, all gone in a single calculated stroke. But the professional fallout was the least of his worries. The news spread like wildfire, reaching both his households. Sarah arrived at his apartment, Emily clinging to her leg, her face streaked with tears. The accusation felt like a physical blow. How could you, Leo? How could you lie to us? Is any of this even true? The ensuing confrontation was brutal, filled with accusations, recriminations, and the shattering of years of carefully constructed lies. He tried to explain, to tell her about the contaminated water, the cover-up, the danger, but his words fell on deaf ears. The damage was done. The trust was broken. Before the dust could settle, Clara arrived, Finn in tow. Her expression was one of shock, but of cold fury. Samuel Blackwood stood protectively behind her, his face like granite. "I should have known," Clara said, her voice trembling with rage. "You are just like your father. Always two faces, always a secret life." The truth laid bare was a grotesque spectacle, two families, unknowingly sharing a man, now united only in their betrayal. Finn stared at Emily, confusion clouding his young eyes. The air crackled with animosity. Samuel Blackwood stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "UV made a lot of enemies, Captain, and UV endangered my family in the process. This ends now." Leo knew he could stay and argue. He had to disappear, to find a way to expose Chemcorp before they silenced him permanently. But Samuel had anticipated his move. He found himself cornered in the parking lot, Blackwood and two armed security guards blocking his escape. "Don't you make this difficult, Leo," Blackwood said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Just walk away, forget about the water, forget about Chemtech. This is your only chance." Leo refused. He couldn't live with himself if he backed down. He lunged for a nearby vehicle, a beat-up pickup truck. But Blackwood's security detail was too quick. He was tackled to the ground, disarmed, and bundled into a black SUV. He was driven back to the Chemtech plant, the rain washing over the tinted windows. He was brought before Blackwood in the main administrative building, a sterile, oppressive space that felt like a tomb. "You've been a thorn in our side, Captain Maxwell," Blackwood said, offering him a chair. "A nuisance, but you are also a complication. You are poisoning people," Leo retorted, his voice tight with anger. "You are sacrificing the health of this community for profit." Blackwood chuckled, a cold, humorless sound. "Sentimentality is a luxury we can't afford. Project Nightingale is too important, too vital." "What is it?" Leo demanded. "What is the point of all this?" Blackwood leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Control, Captain, absolute control. NX-78 isn't a poison. It is a behavioral modulator. Low-level exposure induces suggestibility, reduces aggression, enhances compliance. Think of it as a pacifier for the masses." Leo stared at him, aghast. He understood now. Chemcorp wasn't just dumping toxins. They were altering the population, subtly taking control of their minds. "You are insane," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "Insane? No, Captain. We pragmatic. We resolving problems. This city was spiraling out of control. Crime, unrest, dissent. NX-78 is the solution. You are turning people into puppets. We recreating a more harmonious society." Suddenly, a door burst open and a woman rushed into the room, breathless and panicked. She wore a Chemcorp lab coat and held a data drive in her hand. It was Dr. Anya Sharma, a research scientist Leo had briefly interviewed during his initial investigation. "You have to listen to me," she exclaimed, looking frantically between Leo and Blackwood. "I can't stay silent anymore. The side effects are far worse than anyone realized. Prolonged exposure causes irreversible neurological damage. The compound is designed to rewrite brain function, effectively erasing individual thought." Blackwood's face darkened. "Sharma, you've been compromised. Security." Before the guards could react, Leo seized the opportunity. He knocked over the chair, disarming Blackwood in the ensuing chaos. Sharma and Leo bolted for the exit, pursued by Blackwood and his security team. A desperate chase ensued through the maze-like corridors of the plant. They navigated abandoned labs, dodged crumbling debris, and narrowly evaded capture. Sharma, despite her fear, proved surprisingly agile, guiding them through hidden passageways she apparently knew well. They finally found themselves trapped in the plant. Central control room. A dimly lit space filled with banks of flickering monitors and obsolete equipment. Blackwood and his guards stormed in, weapons drawn. "It is over, Captain," Blackwood said, his voice cold and menacing. "You and the doctor are going to pay for your interference." He raised his pistol, aiming directly at Leo, but Leo wasn't alone. Sharma, clutching the data drive, was already uploading the Project Nightingale files to a secure server, preparing to unleash the truth upon the world. And Blackwood, for all his power and influence, was standing between Leo and the proof he needed. The air thrummed with tension, a silent countdown to an uncertain fate. The rain continued to lash against the windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside the room. The control room was a claustrophobic battlefield. Blackwood, a man accustomed to wielding power from the shadows, moved with a chilling efficiency, his pistol sweeping across the room. Leo, relying on instincts honed over years on the force and a paramedic's understanding of anatomy, dodged and weaved using the room's dilapidated equipment as cover. He spent enough time patching up victims of violence to know where to aim for maximum disruption. Not fatality. A swift kick to a guard's wrist disarmed him. A well-placed elbow to the jaw sent another stumbling backwards. He wasn't fighting to win, just to survive long enough for Sharma to finish the upload. "Almost there," Sharma shouted, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The progress bar on the screen crept agonizingly towards 100%. Blackwood, enraged, lunged at Leo, grappling with him in a brutal close-quarters struggle. Leo managed to lock Blackwood's arm, twisting it until he cried out in pain. But the older man was surprisingly strong. He landed a crushing blow to Leo's ribs, sending him sprawling. Pain lanced through his chest, stealing his breath. He tasted blood. He knew he was losing. Just as Blackwood raised his weapon for a final decisive shot, Sharma screamed. "Done!" The progress bar hit 100% simultaneously. The control room's emergency lights flickered to life, illuminating a swarm of flashing red and blue lights outside. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Blackwood froze, his face contorted with fury. He'd been betrayed. The evidence was out there, beyond his control. Within minutes, the plant was overrun with law enforcement. SWAT teams secured the perimeter, arresting ChemCorp security personnel and taking Blackwood into custody. Federal agents arrived, launching a full-scale investigation. The carefully constructed edifice of ChemCorp's power had crumbled. Leo, bruised and battered, leaned against the console, gasping for air. Sharma rushed to his side, tending to his wounds with practiced efficiency. "You saved them," she said, her voice trembling with relief. "You saved everyone." The fallout was immediate and widespread. The uploaded files, Suine internal memos, research reports, shipping manifests, Fiddy painted a damning portrait of ChemCorp's deliberate contamination of Veterans Park. News channels broadcast the story around the clock, fueling public outrage. Politicians disavowed their ties to the corporation. Lawsuits were filed. The community demanded answers. Veterans Park and several other affected areas were immediately quarantined. A specialized medical team arrived, providing treatment and monitoring the long-term health consequences for the exposed population. The extent of the damage was still unknown, but early reports painted a grim picture: neurological disorders, cognitive impairment, and a higher incidence of autoimmune diseases. Leo, though officially exonerated, was a broken man. His marriage was over. His relationship with Clara was irrevocably fractured. He exposed the truth, but at a devastating personal cost. He spent his days assisting the investigators, providing testimony, and trying to piece together the fragmented remnants of his life. One afternoon, while sifting through a pile of confiscated documents at the Federal Investigation Headquarters, he stumbled upon something disturbing. A heavily redacted file labeled Project Chimera. It referenced a joint venture between ChemCorp and a classified military research facility located in the Nevada desert. The file spoke of utilizing the neuroactive compound 2NX-78-4 for enhancement and control of combat personnel. The objective wasn't public health or social harmony. It was weaponization. He showed the file to Agent Davies, the lead federal investigator. Davies, a seasoned professional with a no-nonsense demeanor, examined the document with a grim expression. "This changes everything, Captain Maxwell," Davies said, his voice low. "We thought Chemcorp was motivated by profit. Now it appears they were operating as a subcontractor for a much larger, much more dangerous operation." "What does it mean?" Leo asked, his heart pounding in his chest. "It means that NX-78 wasn't just released into Veteran S Park," Davies replied. "It was tested there as a precursor to something far more extensive, something involving our military." He paused, his gaze meeting Leo S. We're looking at a potential national security crisis, Captain. A conspiracy that reaches far beyond the walls of Chemcorp. Leo stared at the redacted file, his blood turning cold. He thought he'd reached the bottom of the rabbit hole, but he'd just discovered a deeper, darker layer. The spill hadn't been contained. It had only just begun, and he knew, with a terrifying certainty, that the battle for truth and for the future was far from over. The courtroom felt sterile, impersonal, a far cry from the frantic chaos he'd become accustomed to. Leo Maxwell stood before Judge Thompson, bracing for the inevitable. He'd been indicted on multiple charges: unauthorized access to confidential information, tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice. The list felt endless, a testament to the lengths Chemcorp had gone to discredit him. But the public outcry, fueled by the relentless media coverage and the outpouring of support from the community, had shifted the narrative. He was no longer a rogue cop, but a whistleblower, a reluctant hero who had exposed a grave injustice. Judge Thompson, a stern but fair woman, delivered her verdict: a suspended sentence, a hefty fine, and mandatory community service leniency, she explained, was warranted given the exceptional circumstances and his cooperation with the ongoing investigation. It wasn't a clean slate, but it was a second chance. A fragile one. Leaving the courthouse, he felt a hollow ache in his chest. Victory felt muted. The applause of the gathered crowd sounded distant, unreal. He'd won the battle, perhaps, but the war felt far from over. The aftermath was a slow, agonizing process of damage control. Reaching out to Sarah was the hardest part. She agreed to a meeting, but the space between them felt vast and unbridgeable. The trust was shattered, the intimacy replaced by a simmering resentment. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Leo," she said, her voice flat. "You lied to me for years. You built a whole other life, a whole other family behind my back. How do I even begin to process that?" He offered no excuses, only a contrite apology. He understood her pain, her anger. He'd caused it. He'd broken her heart. He accepted her decision to move forward, to rebuild her life without him. The conversation with Clara was equally fraught. She was furious, hurt, and betrayed. Finn, caught in the crossfire, clung to her leg, his eyes wide with confusion. "You used us, Leo," Clara said, her voice trembling. "You used us as a safe haven, a place to escape your real life. And now everything is ruined." He tried to explain, to express his remorse, but his words sounded hollow, inadequate. He knew he'd irrevocably damaged their relationship too. In the weeks that followed, he reluctantly agreed to therapy. Dr. Eleanor Vance, a perceptive and compassionate woman, helped him unpack the layers of deception and control that had defined his life. He'd always prided himself on being a protector, a provider, a man in control, but his need for control had spiraled into a pattern of manipulation and secrecy. He'd created two separate worlds, each built on a foundation of lies. "You compartmentalized your life, Leo," Dr. Vance said during one session. "You created these separate realities to avoid confronting your own insecurities, your own fears. You were afraid of vulnerability, of intimacy. You thought you could control everything. But you can't." It was a painful realization, but a necessary one. He'd built walls around his heart, isolating himself from genuine connection. Breaking those walls down was the hardest thing he'd ever done. He threw himself into his community service, volunteering with the local ambulance service. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was meaningful. He responded to car accidents, heart attacks, and countless medical emergencies. He found solace in helping others, in offering comfort and support in times of crisis. It wasn't a substitute for the life he'd lost, but it was a step towards redemption. Months passed. The Chemcore scandal faded from the headlines, replaced by other crises. The legal proceedings dragged on with further revelations about the extent of the conspiracy. But the bigger picture remained obscured. The connection to the military project, Chimera, remained shrouded in secrecy. One cool autumn evening, as he was preparing dinner in his sparsely furnished apartment, the phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello," a distorted voice, electronically altered, spoke on the other end. "You shouldn't have dug so deep, Captain Maxwell." "Who is this?" Leo demanded, his hand tightening around the phone. "Let's just say we're watching you, and we're not happy with your interference. What do you want?" "Consider this a friendly warning. Some things are better left buried, for your own sake. And for the sake of those you care about, you might want to forget about Project Chimera." The line went dead. Leo stared at the phone, his heart pounding in his chest. He was being watched. The conspiracy was far from over. He'd exposed a piece of the puzzle, but the larger, more insidious plot remained hidden, waiting to emerge. He walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights. He might have lost his families, his career, and his peace of mind, but he refused to be silenced. He'd tasted the truth. And he wouldn't rest until it was fully revealed, no matter the cost. He picked up his ambulance radio, the familiar crackle a small comfort in the gathering darkness. He had a shift to prepare for. There were people who needed his help, but tonight, sleep evaded him. The reckoning, he knew, was far from over.